Hi, everyone. It is nice to see that pop quiz didn't scare anyone off, but what should be considered is the midterm paper due next Monday by 12 o'clock noon. For assistance please contact us, because shortcomings for readers are ours as writers. Mr. Williams, Bill, will now cover Chapter 5.
Chapter 5, Week 3. Bill Paying Monotony. As with most any individual or body who is focused on economic development, we know there are prerequisites, and in order to move forward, we find ourselves in the bill-paying monotony of personal maintenance. The comforts of everyday living are often taken for granted, as living without toothpaste or fresh tomatoes would certainly be unbearable. There have been a countless number of inventions and creations that make life worth living. Who could think of not having a vehicle for those living a suburban life, or books for those going to school? Some need the chewy, orange-flavored, vitamin C gummy bears, where there is a lot of science and technology used to creating them. When we go to the shelf and open the bottle labeled gummy bears, we also see a price tag, and we think of all the other bottles in our cabinets, their cost, then other cabinets in homes throughout the nation and world. That's a lot of things on a lot of shelves that are all necessary. With the monotony of bill-paying, vitamin C gummy bears become necessities and add to the budget at the grocery store. We all have primary, secondary, and tertiary needs which must be economically maintained and make up our bill-paying monotony. Primary needs are those most basic which must be addressed before any other. We need food, clothing, and shelter as a foundation from which we may grow. Our food includes fresh vegetables and meat as well as water, but it also includes intellectual food, as men are not fed by bread and water alone. Clothing becomes necessary after the body has been satisfied to be appropriate in all instances. Even though most occasions call for casual attire, if the occasion calls for business attire, it is important that we be able to dress accordingly. There are also times in civilized society where a black tie is called for, where we must be able to show up at our best. The last of our primary needs is shelter, as we can't be expected to live outside. We pay rent, mortgage, and property tax to ensure that our place on this earth will be secured. We can't be expected to live without these basic needs, nor will we be able to move on to our secondary needs without first meeting these. Our secondary needs are not necessarily necessary to stay alive, but they are necessary for growth. We need education, transportation, and modern modes of communication, because we all should be informed equally, have the ability to move when necessary, and project one's thoughts as far as we can. We all have a voice that we get partially from what we have been taught and partially from what we were born with. With education, books are necessary to help facilitate classes and reference for research purposes. Transportation allows what conclusions we've come to travel further than the reach of our voices, and as we live in modern times, land, sea and air travel must always be considered. Without the ability to physically move from one position to another, we couldn't test the facts and principles we learn from our education. The ability to move allows us the freedom to celebrate the liberty to which we have grown accustomed. Modern communication needs include phones to converse with others, cable for the world to inform us, and the internet for research and other such entertainment. Even though the communication device could be as primitive as a letter and a stamp, we can now inform others of our position in more ways than one can count, but unable to use them all, we should try. The last tool for existence, or our tertiary needs, are no less a need than any other, but just as we have to first breathe, then think, and then read and write, primary and secondary are prerequisite to the tertiary. The first let us breathe, the second let us think and move, and the third lets us read, calculate, and write, because, if we know about a bill we owe, we are obligated to pay it. There are several types of maintenance bills which must be added to the routine, like the projected increase in sales to ensure the property's building fund. It's what we promised ourselves we wouldn't settle for less. It was complete and total, but also very compassionate. Participating in the insurance rackets, if whether or not they are, because they always pay off in the event of certain accidents, we must pay more to lose less. It's just that the odds are in their favor more often than not, and we know it, but where would we be without that security? Another maintenance bill is gas, as there is never enough, and it's always too high. When speaking of gas, we are talking about any fuel like electricity, gasoline, natural gas, or any other. Transportation is a secondary need, but the fuel is tertiary, because without transportation we'd have no need for fuel. Improvements have to be added to our bills, like those to the home office or the landscaping out in the gardens, with special projects less than $2,500 taken from the building fund. Upgrades become necessary in software and hardware, so much so that miscellaneous excessive funds are necessary to sleep well at night. It feels better to have the latest versions of this program or that computer processor, so we always move to upgrade both. With inventions on top of inventions, we find ourselves needing some and disregarding others, where some are primary, some are secondary, and yet others are tertiary. Primary needs are those needed to stay alive, where the basic food, clothing, and shelter is necessary to sustain life. We have a standard of living which we feel uncomfortable below, and with that our bills which must be maintained. Secondary needs begin with education, as without it we couldn't distinguish mothers from fathers or twos from threes. Transportation is a secondary need as well, because without the ability to move, we can't confirm or deny many of the things we know to be true from our education. We had to include communication as a secondary need, because we are not prisoners confined to our homes nor kings their kingdom, but a mind inclined to empiricism. Tertiary needs include the ever-present building fund, fuel, and annual improvements, which are no less important.
This concludes the information for this time. If there are any questions, we will address them at this time. We'll see you back here Wednesday at 9:11 a.m. Drive safely and remember to buckle up.